So let me just say that welcome to everyone. My name is Rose Watson. I am the Associate Provost for Research, and this is our first session in the Research Seminar Series. Just as you've observed, we are recording these sessions, and the recordings will be available on the Office of Research website. So if any of your colleagues couldn't make it today, give us a couple of days before we upload the actual recordings onto the Office of Research website. I don't think I have any other information to share with you, so I will introduce Tricia Mayhew Noel. She's Director of Research Compliance and Ethics Office. And Tricia is going to talk to us about IRB and human subjects in research, whereas I sometimes call it human subjects research. Tricia.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm being heard loud and clear. So today's seminar, the first in our series, is the IRB, Human Subjects in Research. And IRB, as many of you may or may not know, stands for Institutional Review Board. So what we'll be doing is going over the process. But first of all, the office here at CCNY, the compliance office, what we do, the HRPP office, which is within the compliance, which is the Human Research Protections Program. And then we'll be looking a little bit about the IRB process here at CCNY. So hang on to your seats. So who we are. We more or less follow the mission statement of the City College. And we work to further the college's fundamental missions of excellence in teaching, research, and service by promoting campus-wide education and safety in the conduct of all research activities. Of course, we're adhering and incorporating all the highest standards of research ethics, and within that, the framework of institutional, federal, and state laws, regulation, and policies. Our goals here in the office of Research Compliance and Ethics is to ensure that our systems are clear and accessible to facilitate researchers' adherence to the laws. Our rules and policies governing research activities in a safe, effective, and efficient manner. And of course, we serve the CCNY community. And that consists of all of you who are engaged in research, our faculty members, our staff, our postdoctoral scholars, graduate and undergraduate students who are all involved in research. So we provide support and education to CCNY's research community. We provide that support and education to all of you. We help with the interpretation and explaining of research regulations, the policies and procedures. We orient the researchers to the processes and database management systems, and we assist in navigating through the submission and approval processes to the various research compliance committees. We also ensure research activities conform to those relevant requirements. So they may be city regulations, they may be federal, state regulations. We do ongoing assessments, we audit and monitor research activities, ensuring compliance and safety, and we address issues of non-compliance. The approach that I love to see is more from an educational and training aspect versus more of a punitive response, right? So we want to ensure that everyone is trained or educated about the processes here first before we can even get into any kind of punitive response for misconduct or for not complying with, not adhering to research compliance. So we provide the administrative support to compliance issues. And so my office, like I said, is the Office of Research Compliance and Ethics. And in that office, we work with the HRPP, which is the Human Research Protections Program, and the IRB through CUNY's program. We also conduct IRCOOK, which is the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee. We do the Conflicts of Interest in Research, Responsible Conduct of Research Program, Research Misconduct, as well as Export Control. And of course, I liaise with our College Conflicts Officer, whom you may have heard before, Dr. Maria Lima, as well as our Research Integrity Officer, who is Dr. Rosemary Wesson. So some key compliance terms are going to come up throughout this presentation, right? And of course, you know what compliance is. You're adhering to those applicable regulations and laws, policies, and procedures. The research community, as I explained before, is that of all of you within CCNY who are involved in research. Our key personnel, and this is very interesting to pay particular attention to, they are defined as those principal investigators, the co-investigators, research personnel, who interact directly with human subjects or who have access to private information related to human subjects research during the course of a research project. So the key personnel can also include your faculty sponsors or your advisors, who are, of course, providing that direct oversight of student research. And one of our training initiatives is through CITI, which is the Collaborative Institutional Training Initiative. And what we have is some subscribed suite of IT modules in research ethics and compliance training. And so you can log on, use your CUNY or your CCNY email address and register to take those trainings in research compliance. So exactly what is research? Well, the research is defined by the code of what we call CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, at Title 45, Subpart A, and that's just those regulatory, you're gonna hear a noise, 1 minute. So research includes a systematic investigation, my apologies, a systematic investigation including research, development, testing, and evaluation designed to contribute to generalizable knowledge. Defining what is not research. The following activities are deemed not to be research though some demonstration and service programs may include research activities. And those include scholarly and journalistic activities, including your oral history, journalism, biography, literary criticism, legal research, historical scholarship, including the collection and use of information, those public health surveillance activities, including the collection and testing of information of biospecimens, collection and analysis of information of biospecimens for which criminal justice agencies for those activities are authorized by the law. And then there's those authorized operational activities in support of, let's say, Homeland Security, intelligence, defense. Those would not be considered research activities. So let's define what human subjects research is. The Department of Health and Human Services define human subjects research as a living individual about whom, again, pay attention here, you see I have it highlighted, it's about whom an investigator, whether professional or student, conducting research, either one, obtains information or biospecimens through intervention and or interaction with the individual, and uses, studies, or analyze this information or biospecimen, or two, obtains, use, study, analyze, or generate identifiable private information or identifiable specimen. So the key term here is that you are looking for either that interaction or intervention with a human subject, or you're looking at private information and it must be identifiable. So we get that question a lot, whether if you have de-identified samples, then those de-identifiable samples would not be considered human subjects research. So here it goes into those key terms that I just called out. The intervention, which includes physical procedures, or which you're gathering these biospecimen. So they can be like a venipuncture, blood pressure reading, weight measurement on a scale. So swabbing, if you were to get buccal swabs of the mouth. So those would be an intervention. Interaction can be surveys, questionnaires in which you are interacting with a human subject. And those private information, it includes that behavior in which the person can reasonably expect that no observation or recording is taking place. So if you're in a public setting, you know, if you're in that public setting and you're doing research in that public setting, a person in a public setting can expect that their privacy would be maintained. So you can do observational research as long as you're not inserting some type of stimuli into that observation. And we'll go more into that later on. Identifiable private information is that information in which the identity of the subject is or may readily be ascertained by the investigator, and any identifiable biospecimen. But again, see the key terms there: identifiable biospecimen, identifiable private information, interaction, intervention. Those are some of the key terms we look for to determine when someone is conducting human subjects research, because a lot of research can be conducted without that human interaction, without an intervention, or without using private information. It would just be research. But the IRB is looking at those studies that are engaging human subjects research. So our program here at CCNY is run by CUNY's Office of Research Compliance. And our program is referred to as a Human Research Protection Program, or the HRPP program. And the CUNY Office of Research Compliance established 3 panels in which they call the Universal Integrated IRB, or UI-IRB, for full board reviews and 21 human research protections program. So we have just about a research protection program in each school within CUNY. There are some 1 or 2 schools that I believe may not have an HRPP program, and in such case, CUNY kind of doubles up the review process. And these review are for usually exempt determinations and expedited reviews. CUNY has 4 federal-wide assurances with the Department of Health and Human Services Office, and these are actually for certain schools in which there are more research being conducted versus some of the other schools that may not have as many human subjects research. And CCNY being one of the higher research institutions, research submissions, we have specifically been assigned our own FWA, or federal-wide assurance, and it's 18637. So sometimes you may need to put that on an application, and you can always email me if you don't have it readily available, and I could just let you know what it is. The office is, of course, our office, the HRPP office, is again within that Research Compliance and Ethics office that I just informed you of. And we serve as the first point of contact for you, the faculty, the staff, the students who may become involved in human subjects research. So what is it that we review, right? And how is it that we determine whether we should review this as an IRB? So the following 3 criteria must be met for review. So it must be research, which is a systematic investigation designed to contribute to generalizable knowledge, right? It must be research 1. Check that list: systematic investigation, generalizable knowledge. 2, it must be human subjects, living individuals, data about the subjects, whether it's through an intervention or an interaction, or it must be identifiable private information. And 3, CUNY must be engaged. So it's either our agent or an employee who acts on behalf of CUNY. They are obtaining data through intervention or interaction, or they're obtaining identifiable private information, or they're obtaining informed consent, or all of the above. And oddly, CUNY is also engaged if none of these activities are being done, but if we receive the funding. So if we are the main funding, if we are the, funded organization, and all the other activities or all the research activities are occurring elsewhere, um, it still engages CUNY in the research because we are the main funded agency. I'm sorry, funded organization. So that's very interesting to know because a lot of people may think, well, okay, I've been funded through a particular grant, but none of the research procedures are being done here. They may be done at another university or may be done at a community center. But the fact is that CUNY received the fund and engages CUNY in the research. So these are the different types of IRB review we conduct in the office. We can make a non-human subjects research determination. So again, if that's being done, we're looking to see whether it meets the criteria of being human subjects and being research, right? So that review is done in the office by the researcher or by the HRPP coordinator, which is the role I also play. And this criteria we're looking for is to see whether it meets human subjects research and whether engagement of CUNY is involved. The other review is an exempt from IRB review. That's also done in the office through the role I play again, the HRPP coordinator. And we are looking for the criteria to meet 8 categories that are defined by federal regulations. And of course, those Bellman principles you will learn. We're looking for respect to person, equity of the research, and whether it's fair to everyone. Okay, so those are the Bellman principles that we apply. The expedited review level. So we're going from less risk in non-human subjects research determination to more risk. So we're at that expedited review level. Again, it's reviewed by an IRB member. However, it still comes into the HRPP coordinator. We do a pre-review on it, determine whether all the administrative, all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed. And then we also make a recommendation to the IRB member. So by the time it gets to the IRB member, there should be, it should be a complete application. So again, it's coming to the HRPP coordinator, but then we forward that to get a review by an IRB member. And for these, it must pose minimal risk to subjects, and there are 9 categories we'll look at later that are also defined by federal regulations. And last but not least, we have the convened review, which is convened IRB or full committee review. These are done through CUNY's university integrated IRBs. They pose greater than minimal risk to subjects, and those risks to subjects would be more than those risks you expect to encounter within your everyday activities. So sometimes you may find if someone is at a hospital, an ill person is at a hospital and they're receiving treatment, whether let's say kidney failure, and they're asking to do a particular study with this particular group of patients, right, or subjects. The risk that they may be facing unless they get in blood drawn might not be a risk that would be greater than what they anticipate because of their illness. So when we look at risk, we're looking at those that pose a greater than minimal risk to subjects. So the types of review. Projects that are not requiring review, and we had went over those earlier. Oral history projects, in which these may be open-ended interviews, and they document a historical event and or generalized findings. However, if this historical event was based on a particular cultural group, let's say, then you may find that your oral history project may look more like it may require review and a determination because it's no longer specific to the historical event, but it's looking at the actual cultural findings or findings of a cultural group. Scholarship, teaching and learning and educational activities. These would include your dissertation and your poster sessions. If the results are going to be limited or disseminated right within CUNY, then it would not be requiring an IRB review. Some of these activities may be for educational purposes only, and they may not contribute to generalizable knowledge. Of course, those would not require IRB review. Quality assurance and quality improvement activities, and these evaluate specific programs or procedures when the primary intent is solely for internal assessment or improvement, with no plans to publish or present the results outside of CUNY. Some quality assurance or some programs, let's say you're running a program in which you need to not only assess, but you're going to conduct research to determine how the program ran and how the students did, or how persons were within the program, and you are going to now publish that within a publication, then it may also now need IRB reviews. So when in doubt, of course, always contact our office and we'll be there to guide you for that. So we spoke about the different types of review, and I said that the exempt review is conducted by my office, the HRPP office at CCNY, and we look for these 8 categories as per the revised common rule or the 2018 requirements. There used to be 6 categories, and since 2018, it was revised, and we now include 8 categories. The IRB determines and documents the exempt status of these categories. We look at some research that may include secondary research, but again, having that identifiable private information or identifiable biospecimens. We allow for provisions in audiovisual recording, and it's no more than minimal risk. So the project is a minimal risk study. However, with the restrictions, these projects may not apply to prisoners, and there are restrictions regarding children. For instance, you can look at documents or records or medical records of children under an exempt review. However, you may not have an interaction or intervention with children because they would not qualify for an exempt review. The project would not qualify for an exempt review. With the exempt review and the new changes, these are also exempt from a continuing review process, though the IRB still likes you to check in after 3 years or so, or even to submit closeout reports such that we now know that you have completed the exempt project. So exempt reviews also include research on regular and special educational instructional strategies, whether you're doing educational tests, surveys, and interview procedures, and they may include visual or auditory recording. These exempt review may also be for observation of public behavior, as long, again, that you do not have you're not inserting any stimuli into the observation, such as something as simple as throwing a ball to see someone's behavior, right, to observe their behavior. If it doesn't include a stimuli, then we can look at it under the exempt review. Existing documents, data, and specimen, especially if they're publicly available or identifiable. Some benign behavioral interventions. Taste and food quality and consumer acceptance, which we don't see many of. And then studies of federal benefits. Excuse me. So they're following the exempt review. If a project is a minimal risk and it doesn't meet the category of exempt reviews, excuse me, we then look at it on the expedited review level, in which there are 9 categories of review. These can also include minor changes to greater than minimal risk approved research. So like if you have a greater than minimal risk research and you're doing a minor change such as, excuse me, I don't know what's happening, such as personnel changes, right? or you're just doing something like administrative change to the application, then it may go for an expedited review. Also determines and documents the expedited status of the category. It may be reviewed by an IRB chair or one or more IRB members. And if research is not approvable under expedited categories, then it must go to a full committee meeting for review. So sometimes I may get an application, it's qualified for expedited review, and I send that up to an IRB reviewer, and the IRB reviewer determine, well, I don't believe I can approve this under the criteria. It's not that they send it back and say your project is not approved. What we do then is then submit that to the full committee for review and let the full committee make a determination as to whether the project can be modified to be approved. So some examples of expedited review we include research with drugs and medical devices, some blood samples, depending on the amount of blood that you're taking, and over a certain number of days. Biological specimen by non-invasive means. Those include swabbing, urination, if you're collecting those specimens by a non-invasive means. Clinical data by non-invasive means. Some MRI procedures, right? Materials, data, documents, record specimens collected for non-research purposes. So let's say you went to your medical doctor and you filled out, forms. They can use these documents because it wasn't collected for research purposes. They can use these documents or these the data that you have there for research purposes. Collection of data from voice, video, digital, or image recordings made for research purposes. Research on characteristics of behavior, employing survey, interview, oral history, focus group, program evaluation, human factors evaluation, or quality assurance methodologies, and some continuing review categories. And I'll go back to that research on characteristics of behavior or employee survey. Previously, I said that some survey research can be reviewed via exempt review. However, as long as it doesn't pose a risk to individuals on their financial standing, their insurability, doesn't place any criminal liability on them, then we can review that via exempt. However, if there are those types of risk, then it may need to go to expedited review or to full committee review. The convened board review or full committee review are for those projects that are greater than minimal risk. All right, so we look at those research applications at a convened meeting, and you must meet the quorum for IRB members, such that if you have 9 members, then the quorum is always half plus 1, right? So that would be 5 members needed to have a quorum for a 9-member IRB full committee. These are research not qualifying for exempt or expedited review. Remember, I said that you cannot say something is disapproved on the exempt or expedited review level. You would have to send that up to the convened board review. Then you can review the when there are substantive revisions to an IRB application, which may alter the risk. So that's what the IRB is always looking for. How does the benefit outweigh the risk of the research? And if so you're altering the risk of the research, the full committee may need to look at that as well. And then if the project was reviewed at a convened meeting or full committee, then any continuing review of that research must also be reviewed by the convened meeting. So what are we looking for in that approval to ensure that you can get IRB approved? So we're looking at the experimental design and the scientific validity. We're ensuring that those risks are minimized. We're looking at the risk-benefit analysis, minimizing risk, For example, safeguards, adequate training of the research personnel, exclusion of populations at increased risk, adequate data protection, adequate safety monitoring. We have to ensure that those risks are reasonable in relation to the benefits. And the different types of risk we look at physical risk, psychological risk, social, legal, economic, invasion of privacy, breach of confidentiality. Those are all the different risk factors we look for in an application. We look to see if there is adequate subject identification and recruitment. We want to ensure that everyone is being provided a fair and equitable inclusion of the research. We're looking at those inclusion-exclusion criteria. It must be free from coercion. In other words, the person you're consenting should not feel like pressure or undue influence to participate. We're looking for whether it's an invasion to their privacy. I don't think I know anyone who wants to be called up and asked to be a participant in a research, especially if it's a research that may expose a condition that they may be trying to keep private. We look at the appropriate recruitment tools and whether there's an appropriate research setting based on the purpose of the research. For example, if you were recruiting persons with terminal illness, you would not go into a setting and announce, I'm conducting a research for persons with terminal illness, right? That just would not be an appropriate research setting, right? So we're looking for whether that setting gives that person privacy. Regarding student and employer recruitment, we're looking that it does not have an effect on the grades, that it's voluntary. If the student or employee they do not want to partake, it does not have any effect on their standing with their employment or their grades. And of course, any local campus policy we are following. For screening and recruitment activities, we're ensuring that we evaluate the inclusion and exclusion criteria. Whether if you're looking at research for minorities, then how does that research pertain specifically to that inclusion group of, that group that's being included within the research. We're looking at the informed consent, whether you have adequate information provided in the consent form. Can that person who's reading this consent form, is it written on a grade level that's suitable to them? Usually we ask for informed consents to not be written over an 8th grade level, reading level. How is that being communicated to the individual? Are they getting an appropriate time to respond? And, if they didn't want to participate right away, is there adequate time for them to respond at another time to partake in it? We're looking for appropriate screening tools. The informed consent is a process, and the documentation of that is a process. Informed consent doesn't mean you hand someone an informed consent and tell them read it, right? You want to engage that person. You want to engage the subject that you are recruiting to take part in this research. You want to give them time, like I said, to consider participation. You want to ensure that their questions are answered. And of course, you want to provide that language, the information in a manner and language understood by the subject. So the criteria for approval also includes the informed consent process and documentation. It must be a voluntary consent. Persons should be able to voluntarily withdraw without penalty. The person obtaining that consent is qualified to do so. There is to be no exculpatory language in which a person waives their legal rights. And then for particular groups, you have to ensure, especially for children, subpart D, which are additional protections for children, are also involved in the research, which is your assent or waiver of parental consent for the children. Then there's another criteria for broad consent, And this broad consent is for, and this is all part of the new Common Rule 2018, in which the storage and maintenance of secondary research for identifiable data or use of that storage and maintenance and using this for secondary research. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the story of Henrietta Lacks or the HeLa cells, in which this particular person, they used her cells to develop stem cell lines from it without their consent. So a broad consent would allow for this. The IRB criteria for approval also includes the waivers of informed consent. So sometimes it might not be practical to always give documented informed consent, document meaning a signature. So you can waive that requirement for a signature, especially if you're doing research over the internet, right? Sometimes you might want to waive informed consent. Waiving informed consent doesn't mean that you're not consenting the individual, but it means that the person, you may not want to have their information on a particular informed consent because of the type of research. It might be a high risk research that you're doing. You can also alter some of the informed consent sections that may be required, or you can waive broad consent. We could request for waiver. We also are looking for conflicts of interest, whether the existing or potential financial conflict exists, or a conflict of commitment. Can the researcher adequately conduct this particular type of research? The IRB submission process. So you're submitting for IRB review. You have to submit through the IRB manager. And here is the current electronic database management. Yeah. Used to monitor and track IRB submissions. Users need to log in using their CUNY first username and password. And once the user accesses IRB Manager, the first thing I always recommend is to update your email address in your profile. The email address is so important that you update, because that's how you're notified, one. Not to mention, if you have completed the CITI training, if you include that email address in your profile, the CITI training certificate is pulled into your profile, and it's really a best practice. Once you have gained access, you can then create a new protocol application for review and determination, or you may submit subsequent amendments or continuing reviews, protocol events, and including those violations if you have a violation on your protocol. This is what the IRB submission, ooh, I see an error. So it shouldn't say ID8 login, it should say IRB manager login. And this is what it looks like. So when you get there, you can use your CUNY first login, right? And if you don't have a CUNY first credential, then you would contact hrpp@cuny.edu to get one. So the different types of application you can submit. You can submit an application for non-human subject determination, or the investigator can make that determination themselves. But again, when in doubt, please contact us. The application types are required for non-exempt human subjects research, for review via expedited review procedures, and for review by the convened IRB. Your training is to be completed on CITI website, which is www.citiprogram.org. And you can complete the human subjects research, which is required, as well as anyone conducting research, whether it involves human subjects or not, or it involves animals, or it just may involve any type of research. You need to do your RCR training as well. That is mandated for all researchers. As a faculty advisor, your responsibilities are also in guiding your junior researchers in this whole process. You're looking at the overall project. You're ensuring the feasibility of the project. You're ensuring that there are sufficient resources to complete the project, and that the student is adequately trained to conduct the project. You're guiding that junior researcher in conducting this research. Once you've done that, you are also responsible for the review of the submission. You want to ensure that the submission is complete and that it's accurate. You want to ensure that there are consistencies across the documents. You want to check language and grammar. And you also want to ensure compliance with CUNY policies, applicable regulations, and sponsor requirements. And it's a great teaching time to teach your students about the different ways in which you can do research. So we were going to look at some scenarios in which this is considered human subjects research, and I can engage all of you now in the discussion. You can place your information, your responses within the chat, right? So let's take a look at whether this particular scenario is human subjects research. We have Professor X is evaluating a physician's assistant program at the CUNY School of Medicine and the NCLEX pass rate for their nursing students. The students will be asked to report their results within 6 months of graduation. Professor X will report the results back to the provost to justify modifying the curriculum if needed. They do not intend to publish, present, or share the results outside of CUNY. Do you think this is human subjects research as per the regulations? If you can place your responses in the chat. Am I seeing the chat? Yes. Okay, I don't see anyone respond. I guess we're not moving on until we get a response. Is this human subjects research? I have 3 respondees and 2 are from my office. Thank you for your participation. Okay, let's go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so is this human subjects research? Think about it. It's they're evaluating the program. It's for the provost. The results will be sent to the provost, and there is no intent to publish or present outside of CUNY. No, this is not human subjects research because it's being used for internal evaluation and improvement purposes only. In order for it to be considered human subject, it must be designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. I think I have another one. Scenario 2, is this human subjects research? Professor Y is interviewing survivors of the Rwandan genocide. They intend to use the interviews to document the historical event without drawing conclusions about the participants whom they're interviewing. Is this human subjects research? Let's get your response. Oh. Great participation, everyone. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. No, it isn't, because again, this would be one of those oral history projects, right? It's because they're collecting data about the event and not about the participants. So this is not considered human subjects research. Let's see, scenario 3, reducing coercion. Professor Z, so we had X, Y, and now Z. We have some very good names here at CCNY. Wants to evaluate a new teaching method they have developed. They intend to publish the results and share them with the teaching community. Because it's their own teaching method, they plan to use the results from a survey and quiz given to students in their classroom. What are some ways in which we can reduce coercion or undue influence? I see I have a question from David Matthews. I'll come back to the response, David. I won't forget you. Is there any way we can, okay, de-identifying the response, that's good. What are some ways we can reduce the coercion here? Well, there are different ways. If they're doing this with their classroom or with their students, the professor is doing this with their students, you think of yourself in a student's position. You know, you might feel obligated to want to participate because you may think it may affect your grade. So one of the ways, right, is make their grade not dependent on participation. It's voluntary. You have to make this voluntary as well. But you can also have a teaching assistant come in and hand out the surveys or hand out the surveys, right, for completion. They can get an internet-based consent for an online survey. Again, not collecting identifiers such as name and email is really good. You can collect minimal or no demographic information that could directly identify the participant. State clearly in the recruitment and consent that this is entirely voluntary and it would have no effect on participant grades, and the professor will not know who does or does not participate. And again, request a teaching assistant to distribute the survey. I think this might be the last one. Investigator A would like to conduct research on sex workers in New York City. The research team will be interviewing sex workers directly. What are some potential risks to these participants, and how can we mitigate these risks? I know I see time is running short, and I want to field some questions, but there are legal risks to these participants. And these participants in their project, it could out them as sex workers and detail their engagement in criminal activity. It also bears some social and reputational risk as well. So how you may mitigate these risks? Don't let them sign a consent form, right? So that way you can't link the signed document back to their participation. If you're interviewing, you're going to interview in a private location. Yes, you want to protect their identity. You want to delete any contact information used to set up the interview times, you know, such that if a breach were to occur in confidentiality, the person's information would not be exposed. You want to provide compensation in cash rather than by check, and deleting those audio files as soon as they're transcribed. Encryption is also a great way, password protection, and control of the data between the team members. Sometimes you can even apply for a certificate of confidentiality to protect the individuals. Great, thanks for joining. I want to open up, and I know I had a question, I believe, from David Matthews. Did you want to ask a question?
Hi, it was just actually in reference to the second scenario where the answer was no, it wasn't considered, it's not considered a human subjects research. But so as you're interviewing survivors, I understand that you're trying to get an understanding of what happened in the environment kind of historically, but you're still asking individuals about their experience with it. So they're giving their personal information as it relates to
yeah, so in the beginning, and I totally understand, because even sometimes in reviewing these types of what we call oral histories, it's hard to determine whether it may involve human subjects research or not, right? And so remember, we define human subject research as a systematic investigation designed to contribute to generalizable knowledge in which you are drawing conclusions here. But here in this, they are interviewing about this historical event and not necessarily about the individual. So the research is not about the participant, it's actually about the event, right? So in that case, and you're not drawing those conclusions, we don't see it as human subjects research. That's not to say it's not research, but it just doesn't meet the criteria for meeting human subjects and meeting human subjects research in which it's integrated.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
So Tricia, this is Rose. So how long do these reviews take, like an IRB manager? And I know there are different levels, if it's an expedited review or if it's a whatever other level. How long do they usually take?
Yeah, yes, that is correct, Rose. So from submission, there's usually 5 to 7 days for reviews, 5 to 7 business days for a review to occur. Again, that's an initial review. Everything comes into the HRPP office, and then we kind of act like a triage in the office. From there, we triage whether it needs to go back to the investigator, whether it can go forward to an IRB member, or whether it's going to a full committee review. So if it goes to the full committee review, those meetings are held every 2 weeks. And then the deadline for submission for those meetings are 2 weeks in advance of that. So that can take, a greater than minimal risk study can take maybe about a month before it gets a review from a full committee. The expedited reviews, they come to us first. We have the 5 to 7 days, and then we may need to send that off to a reviewer, which allows another 7 days for their review. So those we can say take about 2 weeks before you can probably get a final determination. However, the initial is usually about no more than 7 days. And again, it all depends on how many projects are coming in. We tend to see more projects when people are on away. So usually like in the January terms or within the summer, surprisingly, we see a lot of projects in the summer as well. I guess that's when people are writing up their research proposals.
Right, right. So there's another question in the chat.
Yes. What is AAHRPP accreditation? Why some institutions are accredited and others, including CUNY, are not? Okay, so this is the accreditation organization that does the accreditation for IRBs or for HRPP programs. And it's a comprehensive process in which, yes, you have to pay to have this done. They'll have people come in and assess your program to ensure that it's meeting the criteria. It's not mandated by funding agencies. So, you know, CUNY's, when you look at CUNY's program, it is complex, such that with some institutions, you have your central IRB and their office is right there. But with CUNY, we have a central IRB, but then we have 21, 22 different schools that also submit. So for us to get accredited, it would require each program, each HRPP program being assessed, which would be all 21, 22 of them, in addition to the CUNY central office where the full committee reviews take place. So it's a bit of more complicated, I would say, maybe for CUNY. I'm not certain how SUNY does their IRB, if they're centralized like that as well. But for CUNY, because our program is centralized through the CUNY Office of Research, and then they have all the various HRPP offices, you know, they write the policies, and the policies are handed on to the HRPP offices. But you have to ensure now that each HRPP office is adhering to those policies as well. So it's a bit of a complicated process to gain the accreditation, but that's basically what the accreditation is about.
I was trying to submit a collaborative grant with NYU investigator. And it seems that NYU IRB was claiming that they are accredited and they are not kind of forming you know, a collaborative application. They are not like trying to deal with actually non-credited institute in terms of the forming a single IRB. So it seems that it was not possible to apply as a single IRB, which was kind of it makes the application impossible for
Right.
on a DoD application, for example?
So I will give you a little heads up there. I worked, and is this, I'm sorry, is this NYU Medical or NYU?
Medical school, yes.
So I worked at the NYU Medical School when we were getting accredited through AAHRPP. The team over there when they were getting accredited. And yes, they were either the first within New York City. I believe they were the first we were the first at that time in New York City to have that accreditation. It was, it was considered a bit of a prestigious feat to have. And yes, there were talks of not having to work with non-accredited organization. However, with the single IRB, as you said, they would serve as the IRB of record because of their accreditation. They can serve as the IRB of record for when they're collaborating research with non-accredited organizations, and it's not a criteria to not have that organization participation just because they're not accredited. So it might be of a bit of a more difficult hoop to jump through, but it's not impossible.
Okay, so my understanding was that I mean, it sounded like in DoD application instruction, it seems that if you cannot form a single IRB, with all the participating institution, that then you cannot like participate in that application. That was my understanding. Maybe, I mean, it might. I mean, I could be wrong, but
yeah. So one of the other things that you can probably look at is probably having an independent IRB, such as like Brady, or one of them that is accredited to work as the IRB, which would be an accredited IRB, in working with NYU as well. And of course, you can always get more information from me on the side with that. I'd be happy to assist with that.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So yes, we're slightly over past 3 o'clock. So if you have additional questions, Trisha's email is on the screen. Feel free to reach out to Trisha. Thank you so much, Trisha, for the insightful and very thorough presentation.
You're welcome.
I just want to say that our next research seminar series will be a month from now, and it will be with Richard Belgrave. I don't have the whole thing. Richard Belgrave will be talking about biosafety, I believe is the topic. And we will send out reminders. We will send out the actual topics and the date, but keep an eye out because I don't have it in front of me right now. But I want to say thank you, Trisha. And if you have further questions about IRB, feel free to reach out to Trisha.
Absolutely. Feel free to reach out. I'm always available to answer your questions. When in doubt, contact us.
And as I said before, if any of your colleagues are interested, this presentation has been recorded and will be posted on the Office of Research website. So thank you again and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.